all of us are in a season. You know, there's spring, summer, winter, and fall. And we're in a season of our life. If you're in marriage, you're either at the beginning stages in the spring where everything's good, or summer where things start to get hot and you start to deal with things, or the fall, which we're kind of in, where the kids leave home and you're dealing with the empty nest, or the winter where you're dealing with major illnesses or death or dying, or, you know, variations thereof. And if you're in addition to being in a season of life, you're also facing various challenges. All of us are facing the challenge of our economy, which is hopefully getting better, or will be getting better. But if you look at the news, it's just turmoil everywhere. I don't even watch the news because it's traumatizing. I actually heard a report on K-Love that they actually came up with a name for this, a clinical term, where people were being traumatized by exposure to too much TV or news on the radio. So I have friends designated to tell me if a hurricane is coming, or if we're going to war, or, you know, who's going to win the election. Otherwise, I don't expose myself to any of it because I got enough of it in my own house, in my own job, and in my own community. And in addition to just those challenges that we're all facing, I know some of you are really struggling financially. You're struggling in your marriage. You got problems with your kids, with your in-laws. You might be struggling with an addiction. You may be dealing with the flood. But in the midst of all of that, no matter the season or the challenge, there's a one constant that I want to speak to today that all of us need, no matter what, and that's to be loved and to feel connected. We all need love and we all need connection with God and with other people. Just like Todd says, we're better together. If no matter what we're going through, we may need food, clothing, and shelter, but we also need love and connection. And that's what I want to speak to today. And hopefully I can help you wherever you're at. So before we get started and get into the message, I just want to pray. Father, I don't know where they are right now, where these people are, but you have sent me here. You ordained this. And I just pray for your anointing. I pray that you would speak through me. And no matter what season of life that they're in, no matter what challenges they may be facing, that you would help me to speak to it, that you would give me your words to say, that you would help them to have open hearts and open ears to receive exactly what they need today, to encourage them, to help them with whatever it is that they're dealing with. And I just surrender myself to you, Holy Spirit. I ask you to have your way. In Jesus' name, amen. The first point I want to make, which I've already stated, is that we were created to connect. And in order to illustrate this, I want to show you a short video clip. So the good is when they're connected. The bad is losing the connection but being able to get it back. And the ugly is when you can't get it back. In response to the loss of connection or the secure attachment, you saw the baby do three things. First, she tried to get her mother's attention by smiling, pointing, playing patty cake. And then when that didn't work, she demanded attention, which was the reaching of the arms, the screeching, and the crying. And when that didn't work, she turned away and withdrew, couldn't take it, just couldn't even take the pain and the distress of it, and turned away. And you know, that doesn't end in infancy. That continues in marriage. We just do more sophisticated versions of it, don't we? We try to get our spouse's attention. They don't give it to us. We might try demanding it. When that doesn't work, then we disengage and we withdraw and pull away. And it's all about the loving connection. We were born this way. The reason I showed you this is because we need this. Our souls need to be connected to another human being, not just spiritually and psychologically, but physiologically. I could give you a whole bunch of information based on scientific and medical research that would show you that that our brains need our parents to attune to us well enough in order for parts of our brain to develop. That if our parents or our major caretakers don't tune into us well enough, then we don't develop the way we're supposed to, and we will have problems with our own feelings, understanding them and understanding the feelings of others, and we will thus have problems giving and receiving love, which is what we need and want more than anything. You've heard of attachment disorders. Attachment disorders occur when there is really a lack of bonding between a parent and a child. Supposedly, I don't know who figured this out, supposedly 33% of the time is the magic number, that if you attune to your child 33% of the time, that's good enough for the child to grow up and be well developed. Now, because we're all different and temperaments are different, that may not always be true. Most parents, most healthy parents, get it right about 50% of the time. But we all get distracted. You can't totally tune into your child 100% of the time, just like you can't do it with your spouse or anybody that you love. But you need to be able to do it some of the time. So, what about marriage? In marriage, I said it's not unlike what this child did. When we don't get attention and love and feel disconnected, we will do the same thing. We will demand or we will disengage. The problem is those behaviors aren't understood to be because of the loss of connection, which is what I'm going to talk to you about later. A loving marriage, we all know, was designed to be a covenant relationship that God designed, but it's also a special kind of an emotional bond, which is an answer to our built-in need for a secure haven and a secure base and a safe haven. You know, after God created supposedly the first human being in Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, he said, it's not good for the man to be alone. I will create a helper suitable for him. And if you look up the Hebrew words for helper suitable, it's two words, ezer kenegdo, E-Z-E-R, and kenegdo, K-I-N-E-G-D-O, which actually would be better translated as sustainer companion. Most Bibles translate it as helpmate or helper suitable. It means sustainer companion. And the interesting thing is, when you look up the word ezer, ezer only appears 20 times in the Hebrew text in the Old Testament, and 19 out of the 20 times the word is used to describe the character of God when he comes on the scene to save man from dire straits. And the word could actually, in those cases, be translated into Savior. That if God don't show up and save man, that man will perish. That same word, 1 out of the 20 times, is used to refer to the creature, the wonderful, beautiful creature called woman that was given to man because it's not good for man to be alone. I will create a sustainer companion comparable to him that will help him go through this life because it's hard. Consider what Jesus said about what was most important in life. Typically referred to as the two great commandments, it also reveals our greatest needs. Mark 12:29 through 31 says this. One of the scribes asked him, "What commandment is foremost of all?" Jesus answered, "The foremost is, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength, The second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So, to me, when I read this, clearly our greatest need is love and connection. It commands us to love God and love others, but all of God's commandments reveal our needs. If God commands us to encourage one another, that means we need encouragement. If it commands the wife to respect her husband, it means the husband needs respect. If it commands the husband to love his wife, it means the wife needs love. So if it says love God and love one another, two greatest commandments, reveals our two greatest needs. We need the love of God and we need the love of others. We don't typically think of it in those terms, but you're an other to somebody else. You're supposed to love other people. Other people are supposed to love you and me. We need it. We can't live without it. Our hearts, our inner man needs love, just like our physical heart needs blood. And while we may not always need it the same, just like our hearts require, some of us require blood type A, some A positive, negative B, AB, O. There's different types of love that we need and we respond to. We all need it, whether you're a man or a woman, a melancholy or a sanguine. We can't live without it. Neuroscience research on love has proven what we already know, and that is that being connected or having a secure attachment with another person actually increases dopamine, which enhances attention and pleasure. It increases serotonin, which reduces stress and fear and worry. And it increases oxytocin, which actually makes you more trusting of others. It makes you want to draw near and close to others. It's called the cuddle hormone. It also reduces stress hormones. What reduces stress hormones? Being securely connected with another human being. And that's epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol. And it's interesting that doctors often, including psychiatrists and some psychologists, prescribe antidepressants and medications to adjust these chemicals in the brain. The truth of it is, a loving connection, a secure attachment to another human being helps with all these things as well. Emotional connection with a loved one is also a very potent source of resilience and strength. We all know this. You can see it with a child, or you all know that when you feel in love with someone, you feel like you can do anything. When you feel like someone loves you, you feel like you can conquer things that you wouldn't otherwise conquer alone. When someone believes in you, when you feel like you have a secure base, a safe haven, you feel like you can go out and explore and take risks. It's just like a little toddler that goes to the park with one of his parents. And he might be timid at first, but then the parent introduces him to the play equipment, goes up and introduces him to some of the children, goes up on the slide with him. And then after a while, the child gets comfortable and the parent goes and sits on the bench. And every now and then the child will come back to the parent. And then after a while, he'll stay on the equipment, but will constantly look to see if his parent's there. Why? Because he's wanting to make sure that his secure, safe haven is there. His secure attachment is there. And as long as that secure attachment is there, he will feel free to go out and live his life to the full and venture out and explore. We're no different than that child. It's from the cradle to the grave that we need this. Conversely, when you feel rejected, unloved, and alone, hence disconnected, you are more depressed, anxious, fearful, and insecure. You're more cautious, rebellious, self-destructive, and you can even develop an attitude, why bother? We know also, neuroscience has proven this, that emotional isolation is dangerous. Suffering in this life is inevitable. It's a given. Suffering alone is intolerable. Can't handle it. We were not made to be cut off from other human beings. The worst part isn't the pain, but the lack of response. It's the baby crying without being picked up. Y'all were just watching a little video, and some of y'all were getting nervous and anxious. That the mother was giving the child the still face and wasn't responding. That's just a video that was stirring up something in you. We were not made to be cut off. And yet many of us are living in relationships where we feel cut off. They're all around us. We feel cut off from the people that we're supposed to be close to. The results of disconnection, neuroscience has proven, increase the risk of depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, substance abuse, domestic violence, divorce, lower education and income, troubled children, and suicide. There are severe, lasting mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical consequences to being disconnected. Truth of it is, we were hardwired for connection. It's not just a soul thing and a spiritual thing. It's a physiological and biological thing as well. So if our greatest need is love, let's talk about what love is. 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 8, many of y'all are familiar with that, says that love is patient, love is kind. It is not jealous, which means envious or covetousness. It's content. Love does not brag and is not arrogant. That means it's humble. It does not act unbecomingly. It does not seek its own. That means it's unselfish. Is not provoked. That means love is self-controlled. It does not take into account a wrong suffered, which means it's forgiving. Love forgives. It does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth. That means love is truthful. It bears all things. That means it's persevering. It believes all things. That means it's optimistic. It hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. In practical terms, when you love, when you exhibit these things, it meets needs. When you love, love meets needs. What needs? I believe our 7 core needs are for attention, quality time, affection, physical touch, affirmation, words of affirmation or praise, acceptance, significance, to be valued, security for safety, freedom from danger, and support, which could look like comfort, encouragement, empathy, understanding, and any kind of practical help. What do we need? We need all of those things. All of us need degrees of those things. If I were to boil it really down to its essence, what do we need? We need to be seen, we need to be heard, and we need to be cared about. There's not a human being alive that doesn't need those things. If they think they don't need those things, or they've learned to live without those things, it means that somewhere along the line, they were really hurt, or they didn't get what they needed at some point. Because sometimes in response to not getting it, we learn to live without it. That doesn't mean that we don't need it. It's just what we learn to do to survive. So we all need to be seen, heard, cared about. When you love someone, you give them these things. The problem comes when we don't get these things. I believe most of, if not all of the problems in marriage and relationships arise when our needs are not met. It's ultimately what all of our arguments and fights are about when we're not getting our needs met. Check out some of the weird things that we fight about. The truth of it is probably the world's leading expert on marriage is based on 40 years of research, the go-to guy everybody goes to on marriage, John Gottman. According to his research, 69% of the issues that we fight about are perpetual and are never going to be resolved throughout the relationship. Hate to be the bearer of bad news. That means if you go into counseling, if you go to a life group, if you go try to get advice from someone on your marriage, this is what I want to tell you. After 32 years of marriage and 25,000 hours of counseling couples, 69% of the things that you argue about and fight about are never going to be resolved. And my advice is going to only be effective 5 to 10% of the time. Does that make you feel good? What I've come to understand is that fixing the problems and the issues is not what's most important. Chances are what you're fighting about now is going to annoy you 20 years from now. That was true with me and Michelle going through the flood. Even though we're better than we've ever been in 32 years, okay? We love each other more than we've ever loved each other. Deeper. We were still fighting about how high up to go above the wet to cut the sheetrock. I'm actually thinking when we're arguing about this, and I'm getting opinions from everybody, and I'm trying to keep my cool and not be a bad Christian witness and backslide, okay, where we're trying to deal with all this stuff and get the house cleaned up so my wife can be happy. I'm trying, everybody's telling me all this stuff. I'm actually thinking in my head, I wonder how many couples are having the same fight about how high to cut above the wet so we don't get mold, or whether we need to cut at all. And the guys are thinking about the money, and the wives are thinking about the mold, and they're going at it. But the truth of it is you're going to be fighting about the same things 20 years from now. That's not the critical issue. The critical issue is the emotional bond between you. The process of communication is more important than actually resolving the issues. The truth of it is we all want to know that our partner's got our back. We want to feel like we have a secure base, a safe haven. We want to feel like we're connected, that that they love us. Though we may disagree, that we're in this together, that we love one another, and that the emotional bond between us stays intact. That's what's most important. There's this thing I call the dance of disconnection. When we're not seen, heard, or cared about, when we lose our connection to the one we love, we'll typically do one of two things, just like the baby in the still face. We'll either fight or flight. Fight means some of us, we turn up the emotional heat. We push, pull, poke, demand, worry, fret, protest, confront, try to fix, pursue. Others of us who don't like all that conflict and all that emotion will try to turn off the emotional heat. We deny, dismiss, disengage, minimize, numb out, avoid, shut down, let the storm pass, withdraw. And while these responses are understandable and often adaptive, it's the chronic turning up or off of emotions that will ultimately create a negative cycle or dance that will predictably spiral into disconnection, danger, and deprivation. The problem is not the fight or flight itself. Both can be necessary and adaptive. It's when these responses become habitual and chronic that they become really problematic. The result is one of three scenarios that's been observed by more than one person, but it's been observed and written about extensively by a woman named Sue Johnson, who invented something called emotionally focused therapy that I got some significant training in the last couple of years. And she's identified three typical dances that are cycles that couples get into. And I promise you, if you observed 1,000 hours worth of couples arguing or talking about issues, you would see the same three things. It always falls into one of these three categories. And there may be slight variations. There may be degrees. And you may see some slight differences, but it's going to typically fall into one of these three dances. The first one she calls find the bad guy. In the find the bad guy, it's mutual attack. We're going at each other, laying blame, pointing the finger. Then there's freeze and flee, where you have mutual withdrawal, where both people are shutting down. Both people are disengaging. Both people are wanting to turn down the heat. And then the third, more common scenario is you have the protest polka, which is pursue, withdraw, or criticize, defend, where you have one side turning up the heat and the other side turning down the heat. The pursuer withdrawer stances, and that's the words I'm going to use, can range from tendencies to chronic patterns. What's most important here, and the reason I'm going to show you this, is not so you label yourself, but to understand yourself and your partner and the dynamics of your relationship better. You can be one way at work and another way at home. You could be one way in one relationship and another way in another relationship. You could be one way with physical intimacy and another way when it comes to communication and the rest of your relationship. And they can evolve and change over time. So I want you to look at these pictures and see if you can relate to any of these. First of all, this is Find the Bad Guy. I mean, check out these pictures. They're both pointing a finger. They're blaming each other. It's your fault. No, it's your fault. Just like in the Garden of Eden when they got disconnected from God and one another, Adam is called out and he says, it's that woman you gave me, Lord. And then God goes to Eve and Eve says, the devil made me do it. It's a blame game. It's about who's right and who's wrong. We're both pointing the finger. We're both turning up the heat. We're both fussing. We're both yelling, making, trying to get our point across and not listening to the other person. And then there is freeze and flee. This is what mutual withdrawal looks like. It's where we both shut down. Nobody's protesting. Nobody's confronting. Nobody's talking. This can also be a burnt-out pursuer and a withdrawer, which is what happened in my relationship. My wife was the pursuer, and I was the withdrawer. She's the sanguine, I'm the melancholy. She's the talker, I'm the listener. And over many, many years of protesting and pursuing and getting me to be the way that I'm supposed to be, she got burnt out, and she stopped doing it, and she withdrew. So she shut down, which put me in an awkward position because my nature isn't to pursue, isn't to go and engage. My nature is to disengage. And you know what? If both people are withdrawing, if both people are disengaged, if nobody's talking, if nobody's protesting, what's going to happen to the relationship? It's just going to die. It's not good. Not fighting is not necessarily good. And then there's the protest polka. The first set of pictures is with the wife as a pursuer, because the husband or the wife can be the pursuer. So this is where the wife is trying to, basically she's criticizing the husband, he's being defensive, or she's demanding, or she's trying to confront a problem, she's trying to talk, he doesn't want to, she's trying to take him somewhere where he doesn't want to go, like the guy with the tie. She's trying to give him a piece of her mind. He's stonewalling her behind the door. Or you got that guy, with his, like this or like that. He's just tuning her out. He's heard it all before. He doesn't want to hear it anymore. He's tried talking to her maybe before, but it just gets worse. So he just tunes her out, shuts down, lets the storm. He wants to let the storm pass. If he starts talking, he doesn't know what to say or do. It's just going to make it worse. So he doesn't do anything. And then you've got the husband as the pursuer, because the husband can be the pursuer too, and a wife can be a withdrawer. And you can see two types of guys here. There's a guy that's kind of like begging and pleading, that seems needy, where the woman is just shut down. And then you can see the angry, kind of demanding, abusive type husband, where he's shouting at his wife and she's putting her hands over her ears so she can't take it anymore. She just can't listen to it anymore. He's basically confronting her and telling her, you don't love me. If you really love me, you would do this, this, and the other. And he keeps trying to tell her what he needs, and she won't give it to him. She feels inadequate, and she can't hear it anymore. It's never good enough. No matter what the scenario, no matter what the dance, I want to give you a new lens to look at your relationship. Whether you're the pursuer or the withdrawer, whether you're, in the the find the bad guy, the freeze and flee, or the protest polka. The new lens is the dance cycle that you're in is each partner's way of managing the disconnection between them while searching for closeness. This is what has really helped me in the work that I do with couples and has helped me grow even further in my relationship with my wife. That all this crazy stuff that we do, the demanding, the turning up the heat, the withdrawing, the avoiding, just shutting down. If you see it through this lens, it's all about losing your connection. Just like that baby in the still face. Couldn't get its mother's connection. The mother went still face. They lost their connection. And so she tries to get the attention. When that doesn't work, she tries to demand it. She turns up the volume. When that doesn't work, she withdraws and disengages. We do the same thing. Thomas Aquinas said this. He said that all sin is rooted in a legitimate God-given desire. That means that really at the root of our sin, there's a feeling that we have and that we're having trouble dealing with, which is connected to something that we need, that we're not getting, that we're probably not aware of to really a great degree. And because of that pain, because of that feeling, we go about getting it met in some unhealthy way. We try demanding, that doesn't work. We try disengaging, we're still left with pain. So then we go and we try to medicate it with something. Food, work, sex, addiction, unhealthy relationships, Facebook, the computer. We throw ourselves into work. We do something. The problem is we don't understand this in our relationship with our spouse. It would make such a huge difference if we did. What happens is our spouse starts reacting by demanding or either demanding or withdrawing, and we don't see it as a reaction to a loss of loving connection or trying to manage the pain of disconnection. We interpret it wrongly, and then it fuels our reaction, and it fuels this cycle, and it just keeps going. And the more the cycle goes, the more disconnected we are, and the worse we're left both alone. Rather than coming together, we're pulled apart. So a snapshot of a typical pursuer-withdrawer scenario would look like this. And we're going to talk more about this on Wednesday night for those of you who are interested, this coming Wednesday. The pursuer, let's just say it's the woman. It could be the man, but let's just say it's the woman. There's a stress in the relationship. They kind of not going well. There's something goes on that causes kind of a disconnect. And what she does to try to deal with it is she turns up the heat. She criticizes. She attacks. She may blame, or he feels blamed. And in response to that, he shuts down. Maybe he's tried to talk about it before, it didn't work so good, so he shuts down, he avoids, he hides. Her perception of him is that he's selfish and doesn't care. It's not really that he's selfish and he doesn't care. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what to say. But she doesn't know that. She thinks he doesn't care. So she turns up the heat more. She gets more anxious, more angry, more desperate. His perception, in the meantime, is that she's too needy and too demanding, that he can never get it right, that he never does it good enough. And so he pulls back. He shuts down. He gets numb. He tunes her out. He's frustrated because he doesn't know what to do. It's not that he doesn't care. He doesn't know what to say. Every time he's tried to talk about it before, it gets worse. So he doesn't do anything. He pulls away thinking it'll pass. And he's actually protecting not just himself, but the relationship from further argument. Meanwhile, the more he pulls away, the worse it gets for her. The more frustrated she becomes. She feels hurt. She feels unworthy, like he doesn't love her, like he doesn't care. The more he pulls away, the more anxious and angry she gets. The more abandoned she feels. And the more abandoned and hurt and angry she gets, the more she turns up the volume. And the more she turns up the volume, the more frustrated and numb he gets, and the more inadequate and rejected he feels. He feels even more rejected, like he can't do anything right. He doesn't know what to do. And the more he feels that way, the more he shuts down. The more he shuts down, the more angry and upset she gets. And the more angry and upset she gets, the more he shuts down. It's not unlike the crazy cycle that Emerson Eggerichs talks about, based on Ephesians 5:33, which says, husbands, love your wives, and wives, respect your husbands. He infers that the husband needs respect and the wife needs love. If you get into a crazy cycle, the wife is feeling unloved and the husband is feeling disrespected. And the more unloving he becomes, the more disrespectful she becomes. And the more disrespectful she becomes, the more unloving he becomes. And the more unloving he becomes, the more disrespectful she becomes. It's a crazy cycle. And this is similar to that. The truth of it is, way down deep, she just needs to feel valued and loved and connected and secure and safe. And way down deep, he just wants to be accepted for who he is. He just wants to get a little affirmation that he's done a good job, that he's doing it right, that he got it right for once. Pursuers usually marry withdrawers. So when I work with a couple, what I try to do is 4 things. And again, we're going to get into this. This is beyond the scope of today. But just to give you an idea, the first step in repairing disconnection or restoring connection is to recognize the cycle that you're in when you get in it, and to unite in fighting the cycle rather than each other. It's the cycle that's the enemy, not your partner. Or the enemy is the enemy using your cycle against you. And then the withdrawer has got to engage, has got to learn to engage, not go away. It's hard. And the pursuer has got to learn to soften their approach and talk about their more vulnerable feelings. Both of them, step 4, is they need to learn to replace reactive with deeper, more vulnerable conversations. So I've got a little exercise to help you with this. You can pick up the sermon notes on your way out. It's called Dissecting Your Dance, and you just basically fill in the blanks. I'm going to give you an example. The first one is, when my spouse blank describe the behavior, I often react by blank. When my spouse gets on her cell phone and is spending too much time on Facebook, I react by getting angry, frustrated, and pouting. I do this in the hope that she will fill in the blank. Notice that I'm upset and pay attention to me. 3, when it does not work, the negative thoughts that play in my mind is she cares more about her stupid Facebook than me. Number 4, I realize that the more that I pout and get angry, the more she wants to be on her Facebook and talk to her friends. Number 5, then we're more disconnected and cut off from each other. Number 6, when this cycle starts with us, we could help each other by, what are some things you could do? Maybe I could talk to her, I could reach to her, I could say, could we watch something together, or whatever. Come up with some things. I'm going to talk about some of those things on Wednesday. With all the technology that we have in our culture, in some ways we're more connected than we've ever been. We can get on a plane and in half a day be on the other side of the world. We can Skype with someone in India. We can text and get a hold of our mate or our kids anywhere, at any time. We can chat over the computer with people in another state. In some ways, we're more connected than we've ever been. In other ways, we're more disconnected than we've ever been. Check this 1.5-minute video out, and then we'll be done. What is it we're all trying to get? What is it we need and crave the most? What we need is love and connection. We all need it, but my question is, are we getting it? Are we getting more of it? Are we really getting what we need through Facebook, texting, and social media? You can get some of that on Facebook, but is that really the same as a real live relationship? Does 400 friends on Facebook meet the need for a human loving connection the same as a person in front of you talking to and touching you. It can meet some of the need, but it's not the same as a real live relationship. It's a counterfeit. That's what we were made for, a real live relationship. Many of us, however, have settled for substitutes and counterfeits. The truth is, we often end up disconnecting in an attempt to connect or to deal with the pain of feeling disconnected. So my parting suggestions are, instead of text them, why don't you call them? Or text them, call me, and actually have a conversation with them. Let them hear your voice. Instead of email, try a handwritten note. You remember those? Or walk over to their office and tell them what you got to tell them. Or have a meeting, God forbid, and say it in person. Instead of Facebook, why don't you call or visit someone? Instead of the TV or the computer, why don't you spend some time with the people that you're in your life that you say you love? Instead of sending your love via technology, sit, talk to, and hug someone. Don't settle for the counterfeits and the substitutes. We weren't made for that. We were made for real live people, real love, real touch, real relationship. Why don't you go after it? Fight for it. And don't settle for less. Amen? God bless you. I'll see you Wednesday night.